So as many of you, most Mondays I find myself on ABC North Queensland with Susan Graham Ryan, and we normally have a particular topic that we'll address each week, and then I share that content through our podcast. And the Olympics are fantastic, except the Olympics also mean that there is a blanket media shutdown, I guess, in terms of sharing any possible content. So all of our audios during the Olympic period aren't going to be shared. So I was a bit perplexed by that yesterday. I thought, it was such a great topic, and I know a lot of people were really interested in it, and I thought, how on earth am I going to share this with people now that I can't get access to the interview? So I don't have access to the interview, so unfortunately I don't have Susan here with me asking the questions. But I sat down at lunchtime today and I wrote down as best I could remember where our conversation went to. So I've got those notes sitting in front of me, and I thought I'll just come on and just talk about that particular topic, because that idea of self-sabotage, the idea that sometimes the only thing that gets in our way is ourselves, resonates for a lot of people, and I thought that I could talk about that today. And until the Olympics are over, maybe this is the creative format that I can share it here in the Facebook group and then use the audio and pop that onto the podcast. The first thing that Susan and I talked about is, what do we mean when we talk about self-sabotage? And they are those actions, those behaviours. They're also a way of thinking where we doubt ourselves in a way that's actually incorrect. So we think we don't have capacity to do something. Maybe someone invites us to do something. We set ourselves a goal, and then all of a sudden the thing that prevents us or stops us from moving ahead is ourselves. Now, what format might that take? Sometimes that's procrastination. So if ever you found yourself knowingly doing other stuff, not doing the things that are going to be helpful for you, not doing the things that are going to get you closer to your goal, lots of reasons why we might procrastinate, but certainly self-sabotage can be one of those things. We're really getting in our own way. Other things that self-sabotage looks like is negative self-talk, particularly anything that's around doubt and that I'm not going to be able to do these particular things. And we often see this crop up for us in relationships as well. Susan asked me about how common is this notion of self-sabotage. It's a little bit of a difficult one to measure. We know that a very high percentage of people report that they have imposter syndrome, and anyone who knows what I think about imposter syndrome will know I actually talked about it in Belief, that I really struggle with this notion that people have imposter syndrome. What we know is people certainly have moments of imposter thinking. That self-doubt. Someone's going to call me out. I don't have the ability to do this. But in terms of imposter syndrome, if I reached up into the cupboard behind me, I could pull out a book called the DSM-4. Oh, mine is the 4. I think it's up to DSM-6 now, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And what we would find is that imposter syndrome is not there. So imposter syndrome doesn't actually exist. That doesn't mean that you are going completely crazy if you think you are suffering from a syndrome that isn't there. What it means is that what you probably have is moments of imposter thinking. And there is a big difference between thinking in a particular way, because that's transient, it happens now and again, versus having a syndrome, which is like having a chronic illness, if you like, in this case, a mental illness or a mental dysfunction. We know that the feelings of self-sabotage are really common. It's a very normal thing that people go through, but that doesn't mean that we have to suffer through it. So why might we go through it? That's a whole range of different reasons. Sometimes we're low on confidence. Sometimes we have that self-doubt, as I mentioned. What else did I write down about that? We might have previous experiences, or we might need to be in control. The other thing that sometimes happens for us is not only do we get fearful about being unsuccessful, but sometimes we get fearful about being successful. So that's another element that can sometimes lead to sabotage, almost that I don't want to be successful because then I have to go to the next stage in whatever it is that I'm doing. I know some people find that notion or that idea of fear of success a bit of a strange one, because doesn't everyone want to be successful? But certainly my experience is that I know that many people have some worries and some concerns that go with success. So again, it's a normal feeling, but when we start to then sabotage and get in our own way and prevent ourselves from that success, it keeps us safe, which isn't necessarily always where we want to get to, particularly if we're in an achievement setting. What does it mean for us when we do self-sabotage? At some extent, even when we're less aware of it, at some extent we're always aware of it. So usually it doesn't result in great feelings. So normally we will feel disappointed, we'll feel frustrated with ourselves. It might impact on our self-talk and our self-confidence. So we know that when we go through those steps of self-sabotage, it doesn't feel good. It's not consistent with setting goals for ourselves. And so any wonder that people find that quite challenging when we're going through that. What do we see about it in relationships? So self-sabotage in relationships can be just picking fights for the sake of it, that sort of unnecessary arguments, those sorts of things. It might result in people revisiting and having relationships with similar people that hasn't been successful for them in the past. And I would always say to someone, particularly if it's something that you're seeing a pattern within yourself in relation to self-sabotage in relation to relationships, that's a really great topic to raise with a qualified counsellor or psychologist of some description that can help you with that. So family and relationship counsellors are often very good at helping people navigate through unhelpful patterns of behaviour in relation to relationships. And the last thing that we only touched on it very briefly in the interview, because I think we only had about 8 or 9 minutes, a little bit shorter than what we normally do. But some of the things that you can do to help overcome self-sabotage. So it starts with being kind to yourself, not being so tough on yourself. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, because obviously to be successful and to achieve, we want to set high goals, and that takes a fair bit of grit and determination that comes with that. But also being kind to yourself at a time when you are going through something challenging. So it doesn't mean backing off the expectations, but it does mean being kind to yourself when you're doing it. What I would always do is, if I'm taking on a big project that kind of has me a little bit excited and anxious at the same time, we know those two feelings often go together, is small incremental goal setting can be a really helpful thing that we can do for ourselves with that. It does take time, and I think one of the things that's most helpful to manage self-sabotage is to be able to say it first of all. One of the first things that you can do to manage self-sabotage is to be reflective. Like, what am I doing? What did I just say to myself? That's interesting. And to look at it through the lens of curiosity. I'm a big fan, as you know, of the power of curiosity. I think curiosity is a great performance enhancer. And so when we are curious about the ways we speak to ourselves, rather than being judgmental, because that certainly doesn't help, then that can help us to navigate through that self-sabotage piece. So I hope this has given you a couple of ideas around self-sabotage, why we as humans do it. We do it because it's a normal human thing that people will do from time to time. But the good thing is you don't have to suffer through it ongoing, and there are plenty of things that you can do about it as well. I guess now that this is sitting here in the group as a Facebook post, if there's a question that you want to ask around it or a comment, you can either write it down below or send me a message. And it looks like probably at least until the Olympics are over, I'll probably be doing a retake of our topics. I can give you a sneak peek, because I just sent through some content to Susan for next week, and now that I say that, I'm now wondering I know what we're looking at. We're going to look at tall poppies in sport. So the idea that we talk our athletes up and we love our athletes until we don't. So tall poppies is what we're going to be talking about next week. Hope you can join us either live on air, or if not, in the recording afterwards, then at the very least I'll jump into the group and I'll do a little synopsis. I'm going to be down in Newcastle next week, so I might do it from cold and breezy Newcastle. So the interview will be over the phone next week. But I hope to catch you then. Hope you have a great week. Hope you're loving the Olympics like I am, and talk to you soon.